welcome back to my channel. Apparently today they are putting carpet in the stairwells, so please ignore any background sounds that I'm not able to edit out. But also welcome, this is my first video using my actual camera. I've been so scared to do this, so next time we do the mic. So if you can't hear me super well this time, I'm very sorry. But next time I will be plugging in the mic. I just didn't have the right cords, and I am learning as I go here. Alright, so today's topic, and I brought notes. Today what I wanted to talk with you guys about was decentering men. And I've been chewing on this like for months before even starting my channel, because this is a topic that has been really important to me, especially as I am like approaching 30 and kind of having a lot of the thoughts of realizing I'm leaving my 20s, but also just reflecting on my 20s and the relationships that I've had and how my friendships, my community, and all these different aspects of my life come together in ways that I do and don't love. And I think decentering men is kind of a taboo topic sometimes, but at the same time not really. Like, even the men that I've spoken with about it are like, yeah, we get it for the most part. So I'm going to give you like a little rundown of what to expect, and then we'll just go through the list. I am going to talk about, first off, like why I don't think decentering men needs to be like hateful or like spiteful toward men necessarily, and also why I even want to talk about that, because it seems kind of silly to discuss why, like it seems silly to stand up for the men while decentering men. It almost seems like that's counterintuitive, but it's not. So I'm going to explain why. Then I want to talk to you about the concept we have societally, at least in my experience, of what a man is. When I say decentering men, I mean decentering the patriarchal version of men. I do not mean decentering men as human beings necessarily, although kind of. I mean nobody's centered. We'll get to it. But I do have a really different picture in my head of what like patriarchal man is versus a human man. And I think when we decenter the patriarchal man, we actually make room for men to be real human beings. So we'll get into that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is whether decentering men is petty and selfish or not. And I think it definitely could be, and maybe that's warranted and due. And I also think in a lot of ways it's not. In some ways it's really brave and very generous. So we'll get into that. Then, and I think this is the part people will be most interested in, we're going to visit decentering men while in a relationship. I want to tell you some things that I've done and how they've impacted my relationship. Things that maybe I could have done differently. That, you know, if I could go back and give myself advice, I would. And also give you some specific examples of how you can decenter men while being in a relationship with a partner that you really love. And finally, does decentering men mean that you need to be all about yourself? I think, I don't know if you can hear that sound, but it is wild. It's like an elephant crying. We'll wait. Okay, oh my goodness. I swear every time I sit down to record, the world's like, are you sure? Are you sure you want to make a video and put it on the internet? Anyway, so we're going to talk about how decentering men can look really selfish. And also I want to explore being selfish, both as a woman and just being selfish in relation to men in general. What an interesting topic that is. So stick around if you want to hear that. I also, they're like knocking on the wall. I really appreciate them, because they like ripped out the carpet in the stairwell, and they've had like the little hooks that the carpet goes into, or like staples or nails or something, and they just are there. So every time I like go out with my dogs and come back, I have to worry about my feet. So I'm real glad that they're there and they're doing this, but does it have to be now? Anyway, so that is what we're going to talk about. I will have all the times linked in the caption this time. It's my first time doing that, and I'm still learning here, so if it doesn't quite work, bear with me. I will probably be trying to blah, blah, blah. I will be trying to like troubleshoot it and get it right so that it's functioning properly. But if it doesn't, you might just have to look at the time and click in the video and bear with me. I'm learning it, I will get better. I'm still really glad you're here, so thank you for joining me in this journey. Okay, so first things first, when it comes to decentering men, I want to talk about this specific part of decentering men because I think that it's most impactful as a topic if we are talking about it. I think I learned a lot from like watching TED Talks and YouTube videos and reading books and reading blogs, but I didn't really start to implement or I guess it didn't start to feel real, this concept of decentering men, until I started talking with my friends about it and even with partners about it. So I think an important aspect of conflict resolution is, or not even resolution, it can be prevention. An important aspect of communication, I guess, especially when you're looking at power imbalances, is realizing that, you know, it's kind of in human nature, and it's most definitely a trait a lot of us see in men, to, you know, if your position in power is being threatened, to become defensive or to kind of feel like fear. And it's really hard to listen and be open and reciprocate in conversation or listen for understanding if you feel threatened and scared, right? If you're more like insecure parts are active, it's going to be really difficult to be empathetic or curious or compassionate. So when we do talk about decentering men, I think it really can be helpful to acknowledge and kind of extend a little bit of reassurance to the men in question, to the men being involved in this discussion. And that's not the same as the way that patriarchal structure has kind of taught us to really sort of cater to men and accommodate them constantly. This is different. This is not, you know, making things super easy. It's not building everything at men's height. It's not that. It's recognizing, hey, this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation. You could feel really squirmy about this. And I think we have to think about men as human beings when we talk about decentering men, because otherwise it puts us in a position to where it's really black and white, it's really divisive, and that's not going to be helpful for people as a whole or for communities, right? We can't just shove men out and be like, oh no, we don't want to talk to you again. There are places that have that, I guess. There are groups you could go to, but most of us genuinely don't want that. So if that's not what you want to do, but you still want to have, you know, more equality, more equity, and you want to have a world that is open and caring to everybody, we kind of have to have these conversations and be willing to make conscious choices in our daily life that help shift the paradigm of where we put men and how we treat men and where we put ourselves and where we put others, all of these things in our daily habits and routines and the way that we behave. I hope that makes sense. So let me use my notes here a little bit so I don't get too off track. Okay, yeah, I guess that was the point though. I really just want to say, you know, I want to reassure and offer up a gentle little nod to men that when we are decentering men, we are not saying we hate you, you're the worst. I know. I can be petty. I can be petty. I have my moments where I'm like, oh, boys, what are we going to do with them? And I know every woman here gets that. But there's a difference between, like, being frustrated, being fed up, like, having a moment and having to vent, versus genuinely thinking and believing and, like, portraying, like, men are stupid and useless and blah, 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 which I think can be the conversation here a lot. So I just want to lay that foundation of, like, we have room for being frustrated and fed up here, and at the same time, we are not, like, kicking anybody out. This is about bringing everyone home, welcoming everybody, making a safe place for everybody, and part of that means we have to decenter men. So this is going to actually be beneficial to the men as well. I feel like I'm really starting to, like, over-explain, so I'm just going to leave it at that for now. The next point is the patriarchal man versus the human man. So this part is kind of difficult. It's going to require a little bit of openness to nuance and willingness to look at ourselves and our own biases when it comes to men. And I promise we're not going to talk about just specifically men this entire time. But communities love men. They need men. We do. We do. They have their qualities. Okay, they do. But the things that patriarchy does, like, it limits men too. It does. And I think most women know this. Like, this doesn't even need to be said. But I also feel like there is a little bit of power, and it's helpful to name it. The patriarchy and, like, the way that we exist in society limits men in the fact that it tells them, like, you aren't allowed to feel these certain things. You're not allowed to show these emotions. It really discourages touch, like basic human contact, touch. Men are not supposed to, like, touch each other. They're not supposed to, you know, have hugs with certain people and things like that. And then the camera just made a sound and shut off. Hopefully it's going to play nice with us. Anyway, I want to say human men, right? Real men, actual men. I don't mean real men like alpha man, blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, genuine, the man in front of you, the human being, not the patriarchy's idea of him. They are capable of emotion, right? They're capable of tremendous compassion and empathy. And they are capable of nuanced thoughts and ideas and of understanding all kinds of things that I guess patriarchy just kind of paints as silly or naive or too soft or too mushy or whatever. So I think it's important to recognize that we have had a picture of what men are painted into our heads, as well as we, as women or non-binary or whatever we want to call ourselves or however we identify, we have this picture in our head of what men are. And I think it's important when we're decentering men to kind of notice that, to pay attention to that. What is this picture in my head? How does it impact the way that I interact, the way that I put myself out into the world, both in individual conversations and as a whole? Like, if I'm walking through the grocery store or I'm driving, how do I act differently based on this picture that I have in my head of who a man is and what a man is like? I think that's really helpful all the time, especially if you're really used to centering men. It's just kind of a helpful thing to have in the back of your head and just start noticing, because you'll start to naturally see where you are as centering men in your life and make some conscious decisions about what the healthiest way to adjust that might be. So I'm putting that out there. The next topic I have is decentering men petty or selfish? It absolutely can be. Yeah. Some people, that's like the first thing that gets them into it. And I think that's okay. I'm not saying go be mean. I'm not saying to, like, make people cry on purpose. I'm not saying to make people feel like they're worthless or like they're garbage. Honestly, if you're going about decentering men by being cruel to them or by making them feel horrible, you're still centering them. You're just being a bully about it instead of being mindful and demure and, like, letting them push you around or pushing yourself around on their behalf. But you're still centering them. So if you think that being mean and being cruel and being petty and making people feel little is decentering men, it's not. It's just rude. You don't have to do that. But I think it's important to also note that decentering men can mean being more selfish, because it means being attuned to yourself, right? To your own values, to your own identity, to your own priorities, before bending for someone else's, especially a man's. And I think this is important to think about, because you can, I don't know, you can get a lot of backlash when you first start talking about these things, especially in more traditional families or in religious families, I've noticed. They don't want to talk about decentering men, right? They have, like, you know, respect your mother and father, and even the mother role is, like, very much, it caters to a man. And so when you talk about decentering men, you're kind of pulling at, like, threads of the actual foundation of a lot of people's lifestyles and belief systems. So it can be kind of scary. And it can feel really selfish if you're the only person in a family or a community structure like that who is asking the questions or considering, you know, how can I cater less to the man, right? That can be really uncomfortable. But I think it's important to note that decentering men is actually beneficial for everybody, because when you do not focus on the man, right, the patriarchal idea of the man, which means, like, protecting his ego, protecting his identity, building him up, not getting in his way, making him look good. When you're not busy with all of that and you're not fluffing yourself up to be perfect for them and you're not going out of your way to make sure that they're comfortable, you actually have room to consider other people. And we'll get to this in a minute, but that might mean considering yourself. We'll talk about that more. But it also is naturally, inherently going to mean focusing on other people more. And if we decenter the man is the only person in our community that we are trained and like constantly bombarded with like propaganda and just like little reminders, even in marketing. It's just all over the place. Every movie we see, men are the only ones that we are trained, men in romantic relationships, that we are trained to focus on. So when you pull your focus away from that, it doesn't exactly, at least in my experience, it doesn't just get replaced with one other thing. You kind of have the entire rest of your life bubble up and start to become more interesting. So it might look like, maybe you feel like volunteering more, or maybe you linger a little longer after class or after work and you ask people questions, or you notice if someone's having a hard time. And you'll start to notice that as you pay less and less attention to over accommodating for men and to like bending yourself into a pretzel in unconscious ways that maybe you were happy to do until you realized you were doing it. Maybe as you do less of that, you're going to actually have more energy, more curiosity, more care for the rest of your community. You might become more interested in hearing if someone's having a bad day. You might be more willing and happy to like wave or say hello or smile at someone on the street. You might have more energy and more time for your own dreams. Maybe you wanted to start a business. There's noisy stuff happening outside. Most distracting video ever. Anyway, you might have more time for running your own business. You might want to start a nonprofit. And even if you don't want to do any of these things, even if you just want to go to your job every day and then you want to come home and hang out with your family or take your dog for a walk or whatever it is, you're just going to have more capacity to actually be involved, grounded, and centered and present in your life. And being around people who are involved and grounded and centered and pleasant, blah, 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 present in their lives feels good. Those are the people who just radiate joy. Those are the people that just encountering them on the street makes you feel better about life, right? It just kind of gives you hope a little bit somewhere in your heart and restores your faith in humanity. And we need so much more of that. I think the reason that's feeling so rare is partly because of the way that we have centered men, and then it's also the fact that we're not comfortable talking about the ways we recognize that's not working and we don't like it. So then we isolate ourselves rather than being in that pool, when really we need to be out connecting and talking and having conversations with other people who get it, because we're social creatures, right? And when we isolate and we just have our community in this little box here, then we're kind of having other issues too, where we are not getting to experience physical touch. We're not experiencing someone looking into our eyes. We don't get to just let the thing that's weighing on us, the silly little thing that shouldn't be that heavy, but that because we've locked ourselves in this little box with no human contact, is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're feeling so isolated. They're hammering on my wall. But we're feeling so isolated and so alone, and we don't need to do that. So sure, you can decenter men in petty and selfish ways, but ultimately that's not what's going to happen. Right? If you're being genuine, you're being honest with yourself, you might have a period of selfishness, and we'll talk about that. But that's not the whole picture. Okay. I am drinking a maple mushroom latte. Decaf, because I cannot with the caffeine anymore. The joys of approaching 30. For me, that has meant caffeine and alcohol are not my friends. I'm so sad. But I am enjoying mushroom lattes actually more than I thought I would. This one is with lion's mane. I used them. They're so loud. Let's wait. It is going to be the most quiet, peaceful day ever when I get done recording this vlog and everyone leaves. Anyway, I used to use like a mixed mushroom powder, and I didn't like it as much. It was just a lot stronger. I could really taste the mushroom flavor. So right now I'm just using lion's mane, and I'm really liking it. I feel like I sleep a little bit better, and I'm just a little bit more calm throughout the day. I struggle with like anxiety and sometimes panic attacks, which is part of why I can't do caffeine anymore. But having my decaf latte and having a little bit of lion's mane in it has seemed to help with that a lot. So, not a doctor here, but I've definitely enjoyed that. Okay, so I have 2 more points. I'm actually going to switch them though because I think it makes more sense. So my next point is, does decentering men mean that I need to be all about myself? They are so loud. I'm going to decenter that man. Just kidding. Anyway, so my answer to that is, if you feel like you need to make it all about yourself, then yes. Yeah. Because here's the thing. We are so afraid to be selfish. So afraid to be selfish that we put others first to the point of excess, to the point of burnout, and to the point of self-neglect. So the thing is that when you pour into yourself, when you're being really honest about what it is that you need, and you're, even if you don't know the answer, if you're being genuinely curious and you have, good intention, you're not going to screw it all up. You're not. If you feel like you really need to be the center of your own life, then maybe you do. This is your life, your one and only life. So yes, if you feel like you need to be the center instead of a man, then do it. Absolutely. And this is one point I will say, they wouldn't hesitate to do it to you. Right? Most of them don't even think about it. They're just like, yes, this is my life, this is my body, this is my brain, this is my autonomy, I'm gonna go. It's your turn to do that, right? In a non-patriarchal society, we would all have that autonomy and that ability and that ease of just being ourselves. So yes, if you feel called to, or if it feels difficult and scary and you think maybe you need to focus on yourself, by all means do it. Because here's the thing, as you do it, and it might take time, and that's okay, you have time. It's your life, it's your time, it belongs to you. But if you take the time and pour into yourself and center yourself, give yourself what you need, eventually you're going to get to a point where that part of you that has been neglected and that part of you that has been, either rejected or not chosen or not tended to for however long that's been going on, maybe your whole life, eventually that cup will fill. Eventually, if you take care of yourself, you tend to yourself, you center yourself, eventually you're going to have trust with that part of yourself. That part of yourself is going to feel like, okay, I have been chosen, I have been prioritized, I am safe here, I get it. And it's going to be curious and become open to other parts of you, right? More of you is going to open up and be curious about the world. So anyway, whatever the reason is that you feel like you need to prioritize yourself, as you're doing it, you're going to be pouring into things that do, like, we're so creative. As you take care of yourself, you're going to be creating more in the world around you, more for other people to enjoy. You're going to be filling yourself up to the point where you actually have energy to give, and you have the space within yourself to be able to be considerate of other people. And that is what we need more of. And you can't do that if you're burnout and exhausted. I am very political, and I also don't feel super comfortable and confident using political language. And I just feel like I have so much to learn, and I don't want to be part of the problem. But I know that by being quiet, I'm also, being quiet doesn't help anybody. So I'm going to try to say this well, and just know that I'm learning and I'm nervous. So something I want to say is that we are in a state where, tyrants are in the White House right now. I mean, you guys know that I'm not pro-Trump. Absolutely not MAGA friendly. None of that. And the thing is, like, patriarchy is like MAGA's best friend, right? Like, these tyrants, they are thriving on this idea of the soft wife, of the traditional family, because the traditional family is their moneymaker, right? The people at the top make money off of all the people in the bottom, and they need people to fuel the economy, right? They need people that they can tax. They need the people buying all the small commodities that their bigger companies make. They need people to have things manufactured for. Like, they need people to fill the jobs that make all of the other distribution possible. I'm not saying this very well, but you know what I mean. They benefit off of us being tired, off of us being disconnected, off of us feeling isolated. Because if we don't feel isolated, we actually connect with each other, we recognize how powerful we are. And there are, like, you've seen A Bug's Life. There are more of us than there are of them. There are so many of us. And so if they're benefiting off of our pain and off of our labor and off of our dissatisfaction and off of our health, our lack of health, our illness, if they're benefiting off of all of that, and we start to talk about it, and we start to take care of each other, and we start to get healthier, and we start to have more energy, that gives us a lot of power to point at them. So in a way, decentering men is one of the most radical things that you can do, and it's not because we hate men, it's because we need to be able to connect, all of us. We need to not be divided. This is not women against men. This is human beings against patriarchal ideals that separate us all from one another and that dehumanize men just as much as women, if not more. And I'm not trying to say, one person has it worse or better, but patriarchy is not a man's friend. It's not. Patriarchy is the egocentric capitalist's friend, but it's not a man's friend. Men are not happy, right? And I have rolled my eyes at this loneliness epidemic that they're talking about, because I know that so many of us have been in loneliness for so long, and so many of us are having actual health problems. Not to say that mental health isn't serious, trust me, I know it is. I've got my own journeys there too, but I almost feel like that loneliness epidemic was introduced, kind of a conspiracy, but as a way to divide us even further, because now it's like, look, men, we see you, you poor, poor babies, and all the women are laughing at you like, how awful, look at these stupid liberals, like, they're so hateful. And that's just not the case, right? But men are lonely because they're disconnected. They're not lonely because women are waking up to their power. They're not lonely because women are choosing to take care of themselves. Men are lonely because they are completely isolated, cut off, not allowed to have their own feelings, right? Because they're not allowed to touch, because they're not allowed to have a long, affectionate hug with their best friend, because if someone that they love dies, the only person they can actually show that grief to is their mom or their wife, maybe their girlfriend, depending on how long they've been together. Maybe, if they're lucky, a brother, maybe, if they've been drinking. But when are men allowed, when they're just sober, just present, with no excuse for acting crazy? When are they allowed to just experience raw grief, raw love, like pure raw emotion? And we know as people, we see those moments, you see wedding videos, you see just random happy videos, you see the videos of people like seeing their loved one at the airport, we see those moments where men have those big emotions. And of course we're like, yes, this is, this is what it's about. And like, see, they are people. But isn't it odd that that's rare? That's crazy to me. Like that shouldn't be a rare thing. That shouldn't be a spectacle. We all experience so much. I know I laugh until I cry almost every day. I cry often because I'm sad. I have like long hugs with my friend all the time. I'm not afraid to like put my hand on someone's shoulder if they're sad. And I think men are lonely because they don't have all of that. And they're not supposed to. And then they're also like trained to resent it, to hate it, to feel uncomfortable and squirmy about it. And shame is the most powerful isolator. So yeah, that was a long rant. But so to come back around to it, I think this is a little bit off topic, but I feel like it's actually helpful to talk about. I think that there's such a big part of trust and honesty that comes with decentering men, because as you decenter men, you start to be more in tune with yourself. You start to notice what is interesting to you, what you're spending a lot of energy on. And even when you first start doing it, you have to start being honest about what you maybe resent doing, or what you feel guilty for doing, or for not doing what you feel like you should do, what you feel like is owed. You have to start being able to be really honest, and being honest with yourself in that way might make you want to have those conversations with the people close to you, which includes men. So, it might feel selfish to pull back and to pour more into your cup and to stop giving and giving and giving. But maybe that's something that you really need to experience. And what kind of pulls it out of selfishness for me and helps it feel like it's more beneficial all around and opens the door to let other people participate, rather than, once again, this being a thing that I do all alone with just this little box and no human contact, is to involve the men in your life in the conversation. You can tell them, I love and care about you, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. And at the same time, I notice that I pour a lot of energy into this. and I need to pull back a little bit, right? For myself and for my own experience, to see, you know, what my life feels like, what my life looks like. If I pour a little more energy into this or that other thing, I just need to see what that looks like for me. Can you support me in that? And just bringing them into it like that changes it from feeling like this backhanded, like, oh, you're just a man, get away, I'm decentering you. It changes it from that, which is just further divisive, to, hey, I'm working on growing in this way. I'm working on, you know, building up my life in this way. And it invites them to see that the change that you're making is not just beneficial to you, it's actually beneficial to your relationship. Now your partner is going to be able to trust you to say no to things you don't want to do. Excuse me. Oh my gosh, that took so many words to get to, but that's what I was trying to say. There's a situation we have now where it's uncomfortable to say no to men, right? And a lot of men care a lot, they really do. And they don't want you doing things that you don't want to do for them. And they're also being raised in this culture and this society that does do everything for them. So yes, it is on them to do the work, but since you're doing the work and you care about them, why don't you bring them into your journey a little bit? That might be your way of kind of leading by example, and they're going to get to see you saying no to things you don't want to do, which actually might help them do the same. And I know we just said, like, oh, men don't, you know, men have all this autonomy, blah, 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 but that doesn't apply at work. And sometimes it doesn't apply in the family either. Sometimes there are things that as a man you just have to do, that you're just supposed to do. So opening up this dialogue and decentering men a little bit might give you a chance to actually have these conversations with the people in your life and kind of bring more trust on both ends, to where he can suddenly trust you to say if you don't want to do something. And you guys can work on being able to have that conversation with nobody feeling rejected or threatened or objectified or asked to do something they didn't want to do or pressured or whatever. You get to have more of a conversation, and that immediately is going to increase the connection that both of you have to yourselves, to other people, and it's going to allow, it might take time, but it's going to allow for more open conversation and communication, not just between you two, but it will ripple into your other relationships and into your community. So that's part of why I think this conversation is so important to be having. Okay, final point, we'll try to keep it quick. Decentering men while you're in relationships. This is kind of my favorite topic, actually. Okay, so we kind of just talked about it some, actually, and I think that pretty well carries the point I'm making here. But I don't know if you've noticed the relationship gurus online. The people that are talking about, like, oh, are you a black cat? Are you a golden retriever? Have that black cat energy. Be the soft girly. All of that. Something I think is really interesting to that, and something that I think really separates that from, like, the trad wife thing, which, if you don't know, from what I understand, trad wife culture is like a traditional wife, and it's that concept of, like, women belong in the kitchen, like, polish his boots, like, always be pretty. It's like 50s housewife scary. That's been my impression. So I do not support the whole trad wife picture. I love a good cottagecore moment, yeah, but those are very different things. Okay, very different. But anyway, so the black cat, the soft girl, the golden retriever, if you watch these people's advice online, a lot of what they're saying is to, like, pull back, right? The black cat thing, like, if you want to be this sexy, wonderful woman in his life that he just can't get enough of, you're supposed to pull back. You want to be the soft girl, don't be overly involved, don't be too pushy. You know, you're just romantic, you're happy. I don't like anything that tells you to force yourself into any shape or form that you are not. But I'm also not here to tell anyone how to have or keep a relationship. What I do want to talk about, though, is that something the black cat energy specifically does is it does kind of decenter men, if you're honest with yourself about it. I think that there's different ways to do it, because the black cat, right, the black cat energy is, like, mysterious. It's always, like, a little bit out of reach. It'll come up to you on its own terms and it'll go away. If it doesn't like something, it will let you know. And how do you do that as a person in a relationship? You could do it in a way that still centers men by really, like, playing a game, like being really calculated, thinking a lot about every interaction and, like, how is this going to make him feel? How can I make him feel this certain way? Like, blah, blah. You can really manipulate a person, and that is not decentering men. That's not. That is centering them even more. You know how much energy it takes to plot like that and to twist and contort yourself in ways that you're not naturally thinking or wanting to be. But I think when you decenter men, you do kind of create almost a natural sort of cat-like energy, because from your experience, you are living your life, right? You're waking up and your first thought is not necessarily the man. Maybe it's your dog. Maybe it's your plans for the day. Maybe it's the, you know, your things that you're manifesting, your dreams, whatever. Whatever it is. And you're going to go into your day. You're going to, you know, take care of your skincare routine because you're focused on your own self and you've been developing habits and routines that make you feel really good and grounded and centered and present. I'm really having a hard time with that. Let's slow down. You're doing things that make you feel centered and grounded and present in your life. And you're not necessarily thinking about him and that impact on him, right? You might say good morning and send something sweet. And then you're on with the next part of your day because you actually have a lot going on, a lot in your heart, people in your mind. To him, this might look a little bit like that black cat energy, because from his perspective, oh, it's not like you're thinking about him all the time. You know, when he thinks of you, he's like, oh, I hope she's having a good morning. And then he's on with his day too. You're essentially doing the same thing that they're doing. But you're not like overly in his space, which I think is what we can do when we're trying to when we've really centered a man in our lives. We're like trying to we're trying to guess, right? We're trying to predict everything he's gonna need, have it done, be there, be exactly in the vibe that he wants us, like whatever. We're catering to his ego, his needs, his comforts, his desires all day long. And what these like black cat people would do is different. We're not paying attention to where he's at all the time. We're not monitoring him. We're being ourselves, and once in a while we check in. So, well, I would say be careful. Be careful, because these kind of relationship advice people, it can get really manipulative, and just be honest with yourself, honestly. But one of the most fun ways that I kind of got curious about how to decenter men and what that looked like was actually by following a couple relationship gurus and just seeing how I actually felt about their advice. I didn't necessarily take it. I don't think I really took any of it. And I didn't just judge it all either. Some of it I thought like, oh, that's really interesting. Okay. I could see like some people that would work for. And there was something I was like, oh, that could work for me. But I did think it was really interesting to hear the ways that these women who are teaching these concepts were really like grounded in their own energy. They really were. And to hear the things that they talk and think about, to hear the things that they went and did, the things that they spent their time doing, the people they interacted with, etc., instead of worshiping the ground that their man walked on. I thought that was really interesting. So if you're trying to decenter men in your life and your relationships, maybe look at things specifically for contrast. So follow people who do really center men and start to pay attention. Does any of it gross you out? Does any of it make you uncomfortable? Do you recognize yourself in any of it? Is there any of it that you like? Is there anything about it that really like scares you or makes you nervous to think about not having anymore? The first step to decentering men while you're in a relationship is probably just to notice how you are centering them, and to get curious about what you would rather be doing. And it can be gentle and slow, and it can take time, or it can be really quick. You can take leaps and bounds and do exactly what feels right to you. I think for me it felt kind of in the middle, but I followed relationship gurus and just noticed what they were saying and doing and how that interacted with my life. So sometimes it was like spot on, and I would see an example and I would be like, oh, I don't like that at all, or oh, I do that and I don't want to anymore. And then I would change a little bit of how I showed up. Something else that I've tried that helped some was creating space in the way that I existed around my partner. So I am someone who has a really hard time like being watched. I say as I record a conversation on camera. Yeah, I have a hard time being watched. If someone else is even in the house, I have a hard time like sitting down to write. It's so silly because no one's going to see what I'm writing, but I have a hard time settling. And I noticed that was partly because I want to be paying attention to what he's doing. I want to know where he's at. And I have trauma. I have trauma. We know, we've talked in this channel. And so hypervigilance is something that I struggle with. But I think that as women, we are vigilant. We tend to be more vigilant than men. So when I started to notice ways that I was being excessively vigilant at home, when he was home, I started playing with that and trying to create scenarios where I could become more comfortable focusing on myself and not being at all involved in what he was doing. And this looked like, you know, putting in headphones while I did the dishes and listening to a podcast that interests me that he would not be into. Which naturally got me interested in other communities and other types of conversations that I wouldn't have been having at all if I had just been spending that time in that part of the day with my partner. Decentering men sounds like this big, huge topic, but it's actually just really small things. It's like more in the how, like it's like how you think, how you show up, than it is in what you're actually doing or what you say. It's very much about the how. It's subtle, at least in my experience. But those subtle things really ripple. Like listening to the podcast while my partner was home and while I did the dishes every night, that was like a 10-minute thing. It didn't affect anybody. It didn't really, you know, like on the surface, nothing was really happening. But inside, I was taking up space in a very new way, and I was taking up space for and by myself. And it rippled because I started to have interest in the show that I was listening to and the topics that they brought up. I got more curious. I ended up like doing networking and connecting with actual people, and I actually ended up getting a job related to the podcast that I've been listening to that I never would have got if I had just been spending that time with my partner or hadn't had my headphones and it had been available for him, which was much more comfortable for me at the time. But then that also went to say, you know, my job allowed me to hire people and pay more people to support me, and my job also allowed me to start this channel where I get to reach out and hopefully have an impact with messages and content. And even if it's just soothing people and making their day a little better, that's still something positive I've put out there, which in a MAGA world we need. So there's that. I also moved to a new town and I got more involved and I got more curious, and I ended up going to my first protest, and I ended up just like really integrating as a part of a community, which for me personally is a huge deal. I didn't used to feel like I could be part of a community, let alone actually contribute, to not just be a drain on it. From my background, my history, and where I come from, that is incredible, and I'm really proud of it and happy for it. And I wouldn't have actually taken those steps, even though this has been in my goals for so long. It wouldn't have happened this way. And it definitely wouldn't have happened so quickly if I had stayed available and present for the man in my life, instead of pulling back, decentering him, and giving myself just a little time. And for me, these transformations happened over like 4 months, maybe less, like 90 days. It was quick. It was huge. And I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I think that just goes to show the way that decentering men and tending to your own needs and opening up to community and just having a little more energy, just a little, really can have such a positive impact. So that is my first chat on decentering men. Let me know what you think in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you have people who you go to for this sort of content, especially if they're Instagram or TikTok, I would love the information. Feel free to drop it. I think this is a conversation that is meant to be had, like round table circle style, not just person to camera. So yeah. Anyway, I am Vera Lee, and I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for being here. Bye guys.